And it's Jonathan Gullis's first outing here on Good Morning Britain. Welcome to you.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're, just in case people don't know you that familiar, I'm sure your previous constituencies will, but you're a former teacher,
Yep.
former Tory MP. You once described Labour, let me get this quote right, as avocado-eating, chai latte drinking, sourdough with almond butter wokerati who are desperately out of touch. And alongside you is Jonathan Ashworth. Was he in your mind when you were making that description?
No, to be honest with you, I think it was my wife, who's a former Labour member. So you know, I literally live with the avocado-eating, chai latte slurping metropolitan elite that I was referring to,
right,
in a light-hearted moment in the House
really?
of Commons.
It's funny how people start describing things as light-hearted from the House of Commons when they're no longer an MP, isn't it? Suddenly they start getting attention. But you, Jonathan, haven't you had a little bit of a goading? I'm going to have to call you Ashworth and Gullis.
I know, that's fine. That's fine, don't you worry.
Ashworth, haven't you goaded Gullis before? When you didn't you say to him, you're not going to make it through the next election?
Well, I said he'll be toast. And I was right to say, my prediction was right.
You were correct.
I didn't realise at that point that I'd be toast as well. I was burnt to a cinder. And talk about hubris and pride before a fall. But that just shows you what politics is like. At one moment, you're high, the next moment, you really are rock bottom. But that doesn't mean you can't bounce back. And I'm sure Jonathan will bounce back.
OK, well, let's see if you can both bounce off each other this morning, because talking of politics, we saw international politics writ large yesterday, didn't we, in Washington? We were talking yesterday morning, weren't we, Adol, about how it was unprecedented in modern times to see European leaders wiping clean their diaries and meeting all together in Washington, not for NATO, not for anything that's prescribed, but to try and solve the war in Ukraine. What did you make of what you saw, particularly in terms of any real peace?
Well, I thought yesterday was actually really positive, beyond my expectations, to be honest.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, look, I hope obviously I hope there will be some progress, but given what happened last time, I was pretty gloomy about it. It looks to me that there's real diplomatic momentum here, that the US has said it will offer security guarantees to Ukraine, although, as I was saying yesterday, they have had those words before. But it feels like the White House is giving Ukraine some of the support that it needs. Ukraine, in turn, has said it will buy, I think, $100 billion worth of weapons from the US, which, look, they're the sorts of things that Trump likes. You know, these are the things you've got to do when you're dealing with Trump. So let's just hope that in the next few days and the next couple of weeks, there's more progress and that we do get peace. But it does feel to me like at the moment, as I say, there is diplomatic momentum here, and that's a good thing.
I mean, Jonathan, is it a good thing because we were all kind of relieved, really? I think we were all going, right, Zelensky, play this right, don't say too much. And we're all looking at Donald Trump and his reaction. And really, if you think about it, this is how the meeting probably should have gone back in February. This is what we expect from the American president historically. So in a way, have we moved on, or are we now at sort of a base level, but it still depends crucially on the response from Russia and Vladimir Putin?
I think President Zelensky learnt a lot from that last meeting as well. I suspect he's had a lot of deep conversations with those European leaders about how to play with Donald Trump, which is...
Apparently some advice from the British.
Absolutely, and you saw that. I think the opening gambit of him handing the Ukrainian First Lady's letter to thank President Trump's wife, the First Lady of the United States of America, for her letter to President Putin about wanting to see an end to the war, specifically around, obviously, the unwarranted death of children in Ukraine in this terrible conflict. So I think that was a very smart move that was played.
Did it reflect to you, I'm waiting to see if you'll give him some credit, did it reflect to you Sir Keir Starmer's letter from the King, which played so well in his meeting?
Oh, absolutely. I think, actually, on Ukraine, Sir Keir Starmer's probably where I give him the most credit in terms of how he stood up for Ukraine, how he's really led an international effort, alongside President Macron in particular as well, and obviously trying to come to a solution. I think Jonathan was right. The security guarantee was the biggest shock of the day for me in terms of President Trump himself confirming there will be some sort of security guarantee, albeit very few details of what that actually looks like, and building on what Jonathan said about you having to invest. And that is, look, for Trump, a deal has to be done. He wants the money into his economy. You've got to make that work. But I think what's also interesting is President Trump has said Europe is going to basically be the very first line, and the US will support that. It's not clear what that actually means.
But, you know, as the Mirror report on their front page this morning, that that, there is a concern that Putin has previously said that he will not allow NATO troops on the ground, that he sees that as an escalation. Now, although this might not be a NATO alliance necessarily, they are NATO members, even if they're operating individually. And is that going to satisfy Putin on that? I mean, these are the big obstacles that are still away. We're all getting very positive and joyous about this, but there's still huge ways to go. And of course, the land swap as well that we're talking about. That's huge.
Yeah, I mean, you're right to bring a sense of caution to this, because I think we're all relieved because there hasn't been another bust-up in the White House, and we've seen Zelensky in a suit as well, not in his combat fatigues. So, look, you're right. Putin has said that it doesn't want NATO there in Ukraine. This is a bit like a sort of NATO by the back door arrangement, isn't it? So how will the Russians respond to that? So let's see where we get to. The next 2 weeks are going to be absolutely critical. But Trump seems to think that Putin does want a deal in the end.
Because Putin's got to sort of want a deal, tell us what he wants. And then Zelensky's got to take it to the people of Ukraine. I mean, he has said that time and time again, that there has to be a referendum because his constitution doesn't just allow for him to give up land. So
and I think this is the biggest sticking point, Adol, which is whatever carve-up there is going to be Ukraine, and ultimately there is going to have to be territory ceded for a deal to be done. It's very hard for President Zelensky to have to go back and sell that. And so I think he's going to have to, on the other side of things, if he's going to have to give up more territory than he would like, he's really going to have very firm commitments needed by the US over security. Because I think if we learn anything again from what we saw in the White House just yesterday, was just like what we're seeing with Israel and Gaza, it's the US. It's the US is the ball game here in terms of what it decides to do, who it decides to come down hard on, and what it's willing to back. A bit like, and it kind of does show Europe is pretty weak, actually. Unless it's all united and the US is backing them, Europe has to work really hard to convince the US to show a Western alliance.
It does feel like there's slightly a new world order, isn't it? And for all that, the kind of army, if you like, of European leaders, you can see that Donald Trump has got his eye on China and Russia as his three that he's thinking about, neither of which are democracies. And actually, after this, there was a response from Putin and Russia via a representative saying that they would consider raising the level of representatives at Ukraine talks. This is following that 40-minute call that Donald Trump made to President Putin during the kind of theatre of it all. Now, raising the level of representatives, does that mean Putin? Does that mean someone senior? Does that mean anything that would really lead to something concrete? We simply don't know at the moment, do we? And before we get into sort of like, I guess, how it affects us, just a tiny bit more on the theatre of it that you referenced. We know, don't we, that one of the big criticisms of Zelensky, the two Jonathans, honestly, Ashworth, was that he didn't say thank you. And they counted in the first few minutes, I think it was actually 4 minutes, President Zelensky said thank you, just to get that in. And then secondly, of course, it was the way he addressed. And the correspondent who criticised him in that February press conference had a very different tone this time. Let's have a little look at what he had to say.
First of all, President Zelensky, you look fabulous in that suit.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, you look good.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, looks good.
I said the one that attacked you last time. See, now I remember that.
Yeah, I apologize to you. You look wonderful. No, my first question for you, President Zelensky.
In the same suit. You see, I changed. You are not.
I mean, he handles himself well, doesn't he?
He does.
When you think about it, that is the leader of somebody who is at war, who's been invaded, and he handled a flippant question about his dress. But it shows how important those kind of signals are to the way we perceive the deal going.
Yeah, absolutely. The body language completely different from that dreadful car crash of a meeting in February. Zelensky, confident performance there, very witty, very quick, actually, putting that, daft journalist back in his box for making I thought, ridiculous point last time about the suit.
It's clear, isn't it? The European leaders, probably Starmer's, had a word with him and said, look, you're just going to have to play it like this. Be nice, be kind, put up with stuff, don't rise to the bait. Because actually, they did exactly the same, didn't they? The European meeting, the leaders' meeting with Trump. I mean, it was like the king and his chiefs. I mean, he went round one by one, tell me something amazing about
that's before we saw that photo of them all sat outside, like, the headmaster's office on chairs.
Yeah.
Online,
That was a fake photo,
which was...
and there'll be people at home who've been to meetings, right, with your boss at work. And, you know, he's not the greatest boss, but you've all got to sit there and go, you are amazing.
Well,
Marco Rutte, you have been a brilliant force.
Marco Rutte, the head chief of NATO, is the one that makes me laugh, because obviously he made that daddy comment that kind of got really blown up by the MAGA movement. In fact, I think the White House released video footage of Trump at NATO with Daddy's Home as a song all over it. And I think Marco Rutte, again, went out of his way I'd say, again, slightly over the top of saying how amazing President Trump is. The fact, I think he was saying that, like, without you, we'd never be here. And I think, but look, as Jonathan has said, it's part of the theatre. If it means that you're going to get the US on side, you're going to get them to listen to the demands of European leaders and have Ukraine's back, I think ultimately you're going to have to just suck up a bit of pride.
But on behind the theatre, though, in that round, we saw Chancellor Merz from Germany and Macron from France both calling for a ceasefire. Very, very specifically. Our Prime Minister didn't. Trump didn't really respond to that. And you could argue that it doesn't seem unreasonable that while you're going to sit round a table to discuss a future, you're not continuing to have your population die. It doesn't seem unreasonable for Zelensky. So did you feel that that was in any way addressed?
Well, the question here now, though, is do we think there is a possibility of getting a final deal done which brings this dreadful war to an end?
Which does affect us here in the UK.
Absolutely affects us.
It's a threat to Europe and all of us, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I suspect that the choice, the decision, the judgment that Keir Starmer has come to is that if the White House believe that they can get a deal over the line, right, let's focus on that, right? So let's not sort of focus so much on getting a ceasefire, then discussions. If you can get discussions that lead to a permanent end to the war, let's focus on that. That's the tactical decision that Trump has come to. And it feels to me Downing Street are going along with that.
Just before we quickly move on, though, for people at home, there's a sense of reality. We have to face facts here, don't we? That if we are going into what is now going to be, you know, security assurances in that region, it might be troops on the ground, other kind of weaponry. There's a financial cost of that. And we know the state of the country at the moment. And welfare needs sorting, the NHS needs sorting, education, every single part of our country is short of money and resources. Is the reality, Jonathan, that people at home listening now, they're going, why is this important? How's this going to affect us? Do we need to be prepared that, you know what, we might have to feel the pinch in some of those areas because what supersedes all of that is our national security and the safety of Europe?
Absolutely. And as far as I'm concerned, we have to be prepared for the fact that President Putin might come to a deal, but we're all going to be waiting in trepidation of how long he's going to keep to the terms of that deal. We've seen, obviously, the land grab of Crimea in 2014. We've now obviously seen the illegal invasion of Ukraine to follow. And ultimately, I just think the reality is that Putin has himself written that long essay about how he wants to see a return to the Soviet Union. That means our NATO allies in Poland, Estonia, Finland, who are on the very front line of this, we have to have their back.
And where does he go next?
But that impact, the impact on the people here in this country, you know, the fact that is another symptom of this war, a war that we didn't create, that Putin has created, and yet people in this country are going to suffer financially, feel it in their pocket.
But I also think that's just a sad reality of war. It's inevitable that whether you are on the front line or whether you are sat back home, you're going to feel the impact somewhere.
All right, meanwhile, there's another war going on in Gaza, despite the fact that, you know, Donald Trump seems to think he's stopped all wars. He hasn't. And what's going on in Gaza for quite some time now is we see it all on our screens, and we all know what's happening. There is conflicting words coming out. Hamas at one point are saying that they've agreed terms to a ceasefire will include a partial hostage release, whereas Netanyahu is suggesting that no, you know, the plan to eradicate Hamas is still the number one objective. Do you feel we're getting anywhere close to a ceasefire and a stop to this escalation and this war?
Personally, no. As long as Hamas aren't willing to return all the hostages, there will be no ceasefire, nor should there be, in my personal view. That we have to continue.
You mean all of them all at the same time?
All hostages have to be released at the same time. For me, someone like me, for example, to even come close to saying to President Netanyahu that it's now time to come to a ceasefire agreement.
Is that despite what he's doing, though? I mean, the hostages is one thing, but what about the starvation of children and the killing of innocent people? I mean, should he be allowed to do that?
Well, the killing of innocent people started on October the 7th, when we saw that Hamas come in and butcher 1,400
Well, I think some people will say on
Israelis.
all sides that it probably started way before October the 7th, actually. But the point is...
But Adil, what's the reason for this? The reason is Hamas has literally got its own doctrine that it wants to eradicate the Israeli state and the Jew off the face of the earth. Iran,
that is also in the Likud party
also
charter,
wants to do that
That is
as well.
also in Netanyahu's party charter as well.
No, Netanyahu is defending Israel's right to exist, to live, to breathe.
Well, Palestinians would probably... I'm just putting it aside. The Palestinians would say the same thing, that they're defending their right to exist.
Well, Palestine was self-governed since 2005. Israel withdrew from there.
But you're not saying that do you admit there's a forced starvation of children going on in Gaza right now?
I don't believe there's a forced starvation, no. While I believe what's going on in Gaza is a very difficult situation where aid is trying to get to the front line. And we're trying to make sure Hamas are not commandeering aid trucks, as they have been doing, and using aid as a weapon to feed in bits their own people in order to keep their people on their side, to keep the international narrative going.
So all the UN aid agencies, Save the Children, UNICEF, who will keep saying that this is not true, are they all lying, or are they part of Hamas? What are you suggesting?
Well, let's not forget, with some UN workers, we did find out they were part of Hamas. Obviously, that's been uncovered and undocumented, which is why we stopped giving aid through normal channels, which was the right thing to do at that time. And the reality is that we've got a situation which was not the making of Israel, was the making of Hamas. Hamas have used billions of pounds of aid, international aid, to build tunnels, buy weapons and live in luxury in Qatar for their leadership, whilst the people have not had the investment into their schools and into their education system, not had the investment into their towns. And
you make a very good point about the Qatar thing, but then the allegation is that Netanyahu facilitated that in many ways as well. But just on the children point then, the UK is putting a plan together, the UK government is putting a plan together to allow 30 to 50 Gazan children to come over here for medical aid. Do you agree with that, or do you think hostages should be released before even that happens then?
So I'm not uncompassionate. I don't think the British people are as well. I think if there are children who, through no fault of their own, have fallen victim to weapons being dropped on them, whether that be bombs or bullets, and they need some sort of support, then there should be. My concern would be, is this then a route to start allowing people to come via asylum system? Because there is rumour that there will be family members allowed to then apply into the asylum system. We should not be using this as an opportunity to enter the asylum system.
Although we did have a system in for Ukraine, didn't we?
But very different circumstances where, let's forget, the Egyptians and the Jordanians don't even want people from Gaza into their country because they know Hamas runs rife amongst their population.
But they have in the past. There's many Palestinian refugees living in all those surrounding countries. But Jonathan Ashworth, Rupert Lowe wrote a letter to the government yesterday morning saying that he was concerned about this government system to bring children over. Are we right to do that? There'll be some people at home saying the NHS is already under strain, but are we right to allow 30 to 50 Gazan children to come out?
I mean,
get medical aid?
I mean, Rupert Lowe would say that. I mean, he's so obnoxious and extreme, he's even been kicked out of the Reform Party. Look, of course we should be doing more to support children, to help children, to offer them medical aid and treat children in our hospitals. What we are seeing in this part of the world is absolutely heartbreaking and intolerable. Of course, Hamas are evil butchers, and of course we should have the unconditional release of all hostages. But children are starving.
And do you think it's a forced starvation?
Innocent, innocent, aid is not being allowed in. Innocent lives are being lost all the time in that part of the world. Yes, of course we need a ceasefire. I have long called for a ceasefire. I wanted my party to come out much earlier for a ceasefire than they actually did. I mean, we do support a ceasefire now, but we should have come out much sooner to call for a ceasefire, because it was obvious that this was heading for absolute humanitarian catastrophe. And I hope that the ceasefire... I mean, look, I've got little... I don't feel very positive about it because we've seen these false starts so many times in this dreadful conflict. But I hope we do get a ceasefire, and I hope the world can put its international and diplomatic efforts into bringing about a sustainable peace and indeed a viable Palestinian state alongside a secure Israel.
Just to bring it here to the UK, in a not unrelated subject, because it relates to the hanging of flags, and we've seen communities and situations around the country where the hanging of the Palestinian flag has caused council's concern because of some members of the community being unsettled and upset by it. This, however, refers to the St George's Cross. Now, Sir Keir Starmer says he supports people putting flags up and also supports patriotism. This has come about because certain councils have found it very uncomfortable when flags have been hung on roundabouts, not far from where you grew up, is it, Adolf?
In Birmingham, yeah.
In Birmingham. And there's been told to take them down, both the Union flag and indeed the St George's Cross.
The council are claiming a sort of a health and safety issue, I think, of people people getting onto lampposts and putting flags up. Yeah.
And at a key points for traffic distraction. Where do you stand on this? Do you agree with the Prime Minister that it's OK to put them up, providing it's not a health and safety risk?
Well, absolutely. We should be flying the flag on all government-owned buildings. We should be flying them in our streets. I'm very pleased to see this patriotic movement across our nation. I'm sick to the back teeth of seeing the Palestine flags all over the place in cities like even Stoke-on-Trent, but parts of Birmingham as well that I've driven through.
Why are you sick to the back teeth of seeing the Palestine?
Because this is not Palestine. This is the United Kingdom. And in this country, our flag should be flying and our flag only.
In Birmingham, we celebrate St Patrick's Day. They have a parade and the Irish flag gets waved.
People can wave flags if they want, but on flag poles, on a lamppost, if people want to show their patriotism, then that's absolutely fine with me. But I don't want to see.
So when we had the Ukraine, we had the Ukraine flag a lot. Were you sick to death of that as well?
Well, I think that's an entirely separate argument at the time of the conflict. Because what I'm talking about is what the government is doing. This is the government of the United Kingdom, and it's showing its solidarity with its people, which is making it clear, as Keir Starmer's doing, albeit I do question this whole patriotism his. When we had the biggest act of patriotism when it came to voting...
Patriotism?
I am questioning his patriotism, because when we voted for Brexit, when we voted to leave the European Union, Sir Keir Starmer did everything he could to try and stop that from taking place. That vote was one of the biggest acts of democracy in our country and the biggest act of patriotism
if you voted Remain,
in this nation. And obviously, Sir Keir Starmer also, Jonathan, let's not forget, when he ran to become leader of the Labour Party, he made loads of promises and then backtracked on. Then he made a speech where he admitted he didn't even read it.
Let Jonathan come in.
Well, it's important, because then he also said about...
Jonathan, let Jonathan have to come in.
You might disagree with people who voted Remain, but people who voted Remain were doing it because they thought that was in the best interests of the country.
I'm talking about the behaviour after the vote.
Hang on. It's not unpatriotic.
Say what behaviour, and then Jonathan Ashford.
It's not unpatriotic to do what you think is the best interests of the country.
Trying to deny the democracy of this country by not allowing Brexit to take place.
You voted for Brexit. You did what you thought was the best interest of the country. I don't say you're unpatriotic. Equally, people who voted for Remain because they thought that was in our national interest. I don't believe it.
They do say that the best form of patriotism is criticism. If you're willing to criticise things in your country, it's because you care. It's because you're very patriotic.
Look, Jonathan's done a great job of spinning. I wasn't talking about how people voted. I talked about after the vote and what people were saying. After the vote, Sir Keir Starmer, along with members of my own party, some of whom got kicked out, thank God, were trying to do everything they could to stop delivering Brexit as voted for in 2016. Sir Keir Starmer has continually lied to his own members to become leader. He's then gaslit the country, whether that be farmers, on other things.
Gaslit?
And then, he's gaslit the country.
You've got to let Jonathan Ashford come back on that. What does he gaslit and what does he lie to them about?
Did he or did he not promise that he wouldn't introduce a family farm tax on farmers before the election? Yes or no?
He made promises on VAT, national insurance,
inheritance tax on farms. In national insurance, he also made a promise not to hit working people. Do small business owners count as working people to you?
It's tax changes.
Because they got hit with tax increases.
Is it unpatriotic to make tax changes when in government?
It's unpatriotic to kill small businesses in our country.
Put up tax. We had the biggest tax burden in history.
And now we've got the biggest under you lot, which is the bloody shambles.
When you were there shouting your head off, cheering on Theresa May and not...
I wasn't cheering Theresa May. I wasn't cheering Theresa May.
Why couldn't you have done this half an hour ago?
Put up all the tax.
Listen, both...
Don't worry, you've got the chance to come back and do more of it.
I love him, really.
Well, sounds like you maybe don't always.